Hello Manchester United fans, this week I want to talk about why Manchester United should not sell Scott McTominay. My main reason of thinking here is, Man United fans, Scott McTominay offers something completely different to what anybody else in the Manchester United squad can offer. He's a completely different type of central midfielder to anybody else in the squad, and I think that could really be to Erik ten Hag's benefit this season. Last season, it wasn't brilliant across the board from Scott McTominay. You know, he only played a grand total of 1,686 minutes across all of last season for Manchester United. That's not really good enough. That came split across 39 appearances, which is also quite a few appearances, but that's really where this comes from. Man United's season is guaranteed to be a long and hard season, especially for a midfield that's only getting older and without the depth in there that's been there previously. Obviously, it looks like Donny van de Beek is going to be moved on. Fred has moved on. Kobbie Mainoo picked up an injury in pre-season. We wait to see when he will first return. Casemiro looks to be doing a lot of the defensive work on his own, but I do think Scott McTominay still has a role to play this season, even if Man United go out and make a couple more signings in the midfield department. Obviously, we've seen Mason Mount come in. He's not at all the same player. He doesn't have the same qualities. He doesn't have the same abilities that Scott McTominay shows. But even if someone like Sofyan Amrabat comes in from Fiorentina, who is the heavier linked defensive midfield sort of second option behind Casemiro, might even play in that double pivot with Casemiro, I think Scott McTominay can then fill both the Casemiro role and the Amrabat role, and probably that Mason Mount role, and really bring some energy to the side, especially later on in games, or in games where Man United are likely to get overloaded in midfield. In the first game of the season against Wolves, we did see Casemiro have a lot of pressure put on him by what was a relatively strong, compared to the rest of their side, Wolves midfield. Matheus Nunes, João Gomez and Mario Lemina are all pretty physical midfielders and all are actually quite good players. And Casemiro really did struggle at times with some of the players that he was coming up against. Cunha dropping into midfield and allowing the two wingers to sort of bomb on a bit more. What looked like a 4-3-3 from Wolves actually set up in more of a 4-4-2. And it was quite clever from Gary O'Neill to go for that, because he meant they could target what was at Manchester United an inverted fullback and Casemiro, and then a back three behind that. What Wolves did so well was targeting Casemiro and dragging the back three out of position, which meant that Matheus Cunha, like we saw against Wolves, got through a lot of times. Obviously, it wasn't a perfect situation for Scott McTominay. He is sort of a sign of the past at Manchester United, but I do think he still has something he can show. I've got his stats open here, Manchester United fans, and I think these stats, there's some real high outliers across the board. There are some lower stats as well. You know, his assists are really low. His progressive passes aren't fantastic. However, his non-penalty goals are really high. His clearances, his aerial battles won, his tackling numbers are all really high. And I would think Man United can still get the best out of using some of his one-off traits that you don't really see anywhere else in world football. Obviously, the expected goals for Scott McTominay last season were at 0.21 per 90. That was mainly coming as a defensive midfielder and off the bench. We have seen him excel in flashes during his time at Manchester United. I always think back to that Leeds game where he scored 2 in the first couple of minutes. It was really impressive, and that was probably his best game in a Manchester United shirt. I think Scott McTominay still has that in his locker, and I think if Erik ten Hag can find a way to make use of that really effectively, it can be used really effectively. Obviously, there are creases in his game that need to be ironed out if he is going to stay. His progressive passes do need to increase quite considerably. He was only at 2.82 progressive passes last season, which comparatively to Casemiro last season, who was up at 6.8, Scott McTominay does really need to step up the progressive passes in his game. But I don't think that's something that he can't learn, especially under the tutelage of Erik ten Hag. Obviously, Casemiro is an out-and-out defensive midfielder. He's never really played as that number 8, but maybe Scott McTominay next to Casemiro can play as that number 8, especially when the minutes are more likely to be a bit more focused this season. He could even partner in sort of the lesser games. If Casemiro's not playing, he could partner Kobbie Mainoo in a double pivot, which might be a really nice way for Mainoo to learn something different from what he might learn from Casemiro. Scott McTominay, for a defensive midfielder, his attacking touches are really high, and that's where I want to see him get more out of his game. He is actually an okay attacker. Against Wolves, he came on in the last sort of 5-6 minutes as a striker, which, could we see that again, especially with the lack of strikers that Erik ten Hag has at his disposal at current? I would like to see him pushed up the pitch to really see if he can become this box-to-box, arriving late midfielder that he always shown this sort of potential to be, but not really ever realised. I would like to see him play in a midfield that sort of looks a lot more Casemiro or Mainoo at the base of midfield, and then McTominay can challenge Eriksen or Mount for that second role, and then Fernandes obviously, or rotated with Mount, or rotated with sort of Hannibal, who all look like they're staying this season. But with the lack of Fred now, the lack of Donny van der Beek, Scott McTominay should find a lot more minutes. It's likely he'll be at the very least on the bench for most of the Premier League if he does stay. And with the rumours around sort of West Ham have money burning a hole in their pocket at current, West Ham might come back in for him. I would urge Manchester United to stay with Scott McTominay. But Man United fans, let us know what your thoughts on Scott McTominay are. Let us know in the comments. Get at me at SamHutchMen if you want to chat about anything Manchester United. Check out the Manchester Evening News and all of our socials. We're across everything you could ever imagine now. But thanks for watching.